anybody who's been paying any attention, we have seen the resurgence of HBCUs across the country. There are a number of reasons, but we cannot deny the reality that with the death of George Floyd, there's been a significant financial increase to HBCUs, but also HBCU have seen explosion. Many of them, when it comes to students, many of you may have seen the New York Times story yesterday. Those of you who watch this show, you didn't read the New York Times. We've been trying to tell y'all that for the last 3 years, what's been going on. Somebody who's been very much involved in the middle of this is Dr. Michael Lomax, who is the CEO of the UNCF, of course, as longtime resident here in Atlanta, so he knows this place real well. Dr. Lomax, good to see you. How you doing?
Hey, welcome to my town, man.
Yeah, indeed.
I'm glad to have you here.
Well, I see you, and you dressed appropriately. That's the seersucker you got going on?
A little bit of seersucker, but you know, I'm not wearing my,
hey, look,
great white African attire as you are.
I'm from Houston. I know how to dress in the heat. I know how to dress in the heat. So all these folks been complaining about how hot it is. I'm like, y'all, this is a spring day. This is a big deal.
This is good weather down here.
Indeed, indeed. Let's talk about this summit. This is an annual gathering of the UNCF?
Well, it is an interrupted annual gathering of UNCF. You know, we haven't been able to convene our community in 2 years. And there's a lot of pent-up demand. And there's a lot of new news. You know, there's a lot that has been happening. You know, if you were to wind the clock back to 2000, to March, when everything shut down and the pandemic...
2020.
2020.
Right.
And the pandemic was the news of the day. You know, I think if you were to ask black college presidents and black college students what's the future, they would say it looks pretty grim.
Yeah.
We're going to have to shut down campuses, go home. We're going to have to go online.
Oh, no, I remember. My niece is a student at Howard University. I get the notice. I call her parents. I'm like, she going home.
Yeah.
And so I had to go get her, bring her to our house. I had to call a friend. I was like, say, man, Howard is shutting down in 24 hours. He was like, what? I said, you need to come get your daughter. I mean, so people, they didn't know what was going on. Then it was like, well, classes come back in the fall. She came back to our house in the fall. She went to school at our house. So I'm like, because they couldn't go to class.
Yeah. Well, and that's right. I mean, we had a crisis. UNCF and black colleges got together and we said, what do we do to manage our way through this crisis? How do we stabilize our institutions and actually the academic experience of our students, because it was totally disrupted.
Right.
Your niece had someplace to go. She had someplace to go where there was Wi-Fi.
Right.
She had probably all this equipment you got in your hand.
Yep.
Think about most of our students didn't have that. So we had to jump in quickly. We had to provide Wi-Fi. We had to provide equipment. We had to help people find housing. In the fall, we had an early recovery, but it was only a partial recovery because a lot of our campuses could not open up.
Right.
And now, 2 years later, we're back. We're ending an academic year. We're preparing for another academic year. And guess what? HBCUs are more visible than they've ever been. They are attracting a new generation of students. They are attracting a new generation of philanthropy. It seems like a period of opportunity. So we are convening at a time which is not really what we expected, but we are convening at a time of momentum. And the question is this momentum for the moment, or is this the new future for HBCUs?
I'm going to come back to that in a second. I do want to talk about what was transpiring, especially in the digital space, because many HBCUs, like most black institutions, but not just black people, a lot of people all across the country were grossly unprepared for a totally virtual world. But the reality, it was exacerbated, frankly, in our community. There were a lot of HBCUs. I don't even want to talk. If I bring up HBCU online to Tom Joyner, he will start cussing.
Yeah.
Because what he was trying to do years ago, folks were resistant. A lot of black churches didn't want to be online, but all of a sudden, COVID, they had no choice.
Yeah.
And so what has been interesting over the last 2 years, it has forced so many institutions to have to do the things that they were long resisting.
Yeah, and you know, black colleges and black churches, two foundation institutions in the black community, we could not afford to be shut down and not have an alternative. And so we did a lot of scurrying, but you know, we were pretty adaptable and we found a way. I know in the work that we did, we had to help thousands of black college faculty transition their classes from in person on a piece of paper and a lecture to online. We had to help institutions get the online ability to do that with their students. And we did. We did a pretty good job. Now what we're thinking about is how do we prepare for that new future?
Right.
And that's what we're doing here. We're also celebrating being together. You know, this is a community, so we got to do a little celebrating.
Right.
But also understanding what was the journey for our students, our faculty, our institutions, and how do we make that a building block for the future?
It is interesting you were talking about, how do you move in the future? Because I'm trying to think, I'm probably now up to 65 or so HBCUs that I've been to. Done 14 commencements. And so I was speaking to the South Carolina State alumni at the beginning of the year. New president. And what was interesting is these alumni were so focused on new buildings and getting students back on campus. And I was telling them, folks, pump your brakes. You're talking about South Carolina State when you were there. I said, you now have a world where there are students who can actually finish from your school and they're in California.
Yeah.
And I said, and this is what I told the alumni. I said, I need y'all to back the hell off and let your president do what he needs to do.
And to realize that this forcing mechanism that we call COVID actually is laying a foundation for a broader reach for HBCUs. I mean, the fact that today, there are so many of those students who want their HBCU experience in person and on campus, yet there are also a bunch of people whose lives have been disrupted and they don't want to disrupt their education.
But they also financially can't necessarily afford to go. So they want to go, hey, where my mom or dad went, but the travel, all those things that go along with it. And so it's just creating a new way for them to still participate.
And so what I'm saying to my colleagues in HBCU land is we've got to make sure that we don't squander this crisis.
There you go.
That we really build on it. What did it tell us about who wants to be a part of our community and how we reach them and give them their piece of it? And so a lot of our institutions now, yes, they are bringing students back in person, but they're also going hybrid.
Right.
And they are, reaching out to bring more students.
And getting creative in the process of their teaching.
And getting creative and extending their brand. You know, Spelman College has created an adult learning program which is giving a bunch of black women who already have degrees an opportunity to have a Spelman experience. And how are they having that? They're having it online.
Well, Morehouse said that if you had not finished, if you had X number of credits and you were looking to finish, they allow for them to finish at Morehouse those last 2 years.
Now, let's just pause for a moment and remember what it was like back in the day when you had to show up, take that course, and we weren't flexible. And so we've learned.
Well, you being nice, you said weren't flexible.
Well,
no, extremely resistant.
Resistant. And I think we're gonna benefit from that. And we're going to give this experience to others. And I want to say, but I do want to lift up some real heroes and sheroes during this period. The first group I want to lift up is the students who didn't give up.
Right.
And that they have persisted. We've seen them having the opportunity this year for a graduation on their campuses. Think about, my grandson is a rising junior at Morehouse. So think what happened to him. He didn't have a senior year of high school. His freshman year was at my house. And his sophomore year, he's finally gotten to live on campus.
Right.
But he hasn't been on the Spelman campus because he doesn't have a class over there, so he's not allowed on it because they've had to be so protected.
Right.
Yet he is making satisfactory academic progress, and he's going to graduate in 4 years. I want to lift up those students because they've been incredible. I want to lift up the faculty who have stuck with our institutions and are now they're virtual faculty and in-person faculty. And I want to lift up the college leaders who have fought for black colleges over the last 2 years. And our black colleges are today, Roland, in stronger financial position because of the work that we did in Washington, D.C.,
Right.
We're getting loan forgiveness to the institution.
$1.6 billion.
$1.6 billion, getting funding out of the funds that came to our COVID institutions.
We were talking about nearly $7 billion, and we've covered that extensively on the show. And I gotta ask you this, because this has been one of the things that's been driving me crazy. When I hear people who are very dismissive of that $7 or $8 billion, and I literally have gone through the numbers on the air, and I've had to show people that literally Alabama A&M, Alabama State, Florida A&M, North Carolina A&T, not going on the list, they got collectively 4 times as much money than the state was giving them.
Yes.
So all these people who were saying, we've got nothing for black people from Biden, from the Democrats in Congress, the fact of the matter is that $1.6 billion in loan forgiveness is huge.
Oh, look, that funding has been the cushion that has saved historically black colleges.
And folks, loan forgiveness means you ain't got to pay the money back.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what it means.
And certainly black colleges deserve and need more. But this is a down payment, and a significant down payment. And it has been done by the White House, the Congressional Black Caucus, and our allies in the United States Congress.
Right.
That's a big deal. Can't dismiss it. And then there's been private philanthropy. Now, the private philanthropy, the federal funds went to everybody.
Right.
The private philanthropy went to a smaller group of them. And while I welcome that philanthropy and I appreciate it, you can't just support 20% of black colleges and expect 100% of them to produce different results. So we still live in a time when black colleges are playing catch up, and where there is a focus on helping the well-known few, and not the entire community.
Right. And on that particular point there, because when it comes down to the money, there was a tremendous amount of money that was doled out to black institutions after the death of George Floyd. Some called it white guilt. Some said this was the reckoning. To your point about this moment, this is what I keep saying. We're operating what I call a third reconstruction.
Right.
And so our mentality has to be that way. That we can't just be, okay, let's be satisfied for the last 2 years. Say, no. We've got to have this focus for the next 10 to 15, 20 years, what I call sustained investment.
Yes. The point you made about, you listed those black public institutions. Yes, they got 4 times the amount from the federal government than they'd been getting from the state. But the states were still underfunding them and have been doing that for 100 years.
Yep.
So 2 years don't make up for 100 years.
Precisely. Well, look, I know you have. I got it. You got to give me the rap 3 times. Tell Roy to slow down. This ain't my first rodeo.
Well,
so you got to.
And guess what? It's not mine either.
I got it right.
And it's not ours together. We know when to stop the show.
I looked at it. It's 6:19. The panel starts at 6:30. You're gonna be sitting there with the conversation. We'll be carrying some of it live. We'll be chatting again. But we're certainly.
But let me just say this: the most important things we're doing here are 2. We're bringing the community together, and we've got you here to amplify it across the country. So I want to thank you, Roland Martin, because you have been the voice of black colleges. You've been an advocate for our students, our faculty, and our institutions. And you are always unfiltered and telling it right.
That's the only way. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
We welcome you to the launch of the Mass Poor People's Low Wage Assembly and Moral March on Washington, D.C., June 18, 2022.
We are a new, unsettling force, and we are powerful. New, unsettling force, and we're here. We're rising up to demonstrate the compelling power that we, poor and low-income people, have to reconstruct society from the bottom up.
And we need to do it with the loudest voices possible, the biggest actions possible.
Because we know that there is no scarcity in this land. The only scarcity is the moral will to do what's right.
Hold on, just a little while longer.
We are those with sub-minimum wage jobs who can't afford sky-high rent.
People with disabilities are the fastest growing minority group.
It's crazy to me that in 2021, it's still legal for workplaces to pay a sub-minimum wage to people with disabilities.
There are still so much trial and tribulations that we go through as Indigenous people. We can't get a decent wage to sustain ourselves, nor can we get adequate housing.
Veterans across this nation say enough is enough. We can't pat essential workers on the back on one day and then cut their health care the next day.
Health is a political choice.
What more do I need to do to prove that my voice is just as valuable as anyone else's?
There are still forces in denial that would try to slow walk our transition to a clean economy and a just future for us all.
We have an immoral system run by immoral people.
But together we walk, and we walk and we fight. It's time for a change!
Reconstruyamos esta gran nación!
See, we are people of resilience. As we fight these interlocking injustices together,
When we work together, mobilize together, and rise together, we become a voice for the voiceless, and we become an agent of change in a time where great change is needed.
We need the third Reconstruction to ensure that deaf people, people with disabilities, and all people can have the right to live and to thrive.
We know what they are doing, but the question is, what are we going to do? Reconstruction begins when we change our mentality and say it's time for you to get your foot off of my neck.